Please raise your hand if you live in Europe. Your health and your well-being are intimately connected to the health of the Amazon rainforest. Please raise your hand if you live in Asia or the Middle East. Your health and your well-being are intimately interconnected with the health of the Amazon rainforest. Now raise your hand if you live on planet Earth. Good. Whether we live in Beijing, Geneva, or Johannesburg, our species resides on the web of life. Our well-being is fundamentally interconnected with the photosynthesis and the biodiversity and the flying rivers of the Amazon rainforest, which might be half a world away. Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Jonathan Jennings. I am the co-CEO of Health in Harmony, a 20-year-old planetary health organization that is moving resources into the hands and the climate-critical solutions of Earth's rainforest guardians. We understand that the health of Earth's tropical rainforests depend on the spiritual, cultural, and physical well-being of the indigenous, Afro-descendant, and traditional peoples who have stewarded these rainforests for millennia. We believe that Earth's rainforest guardians must be at the center of climate action and climate finance. Now, thank you so much for making this session part of your ChangeNOW experience. The Grand Palais is buzzing, so I want to invite you into this space fully and completely. Close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, wiggle your toes in your shoes, feel the bottoms of your feet firmly planted on the ground. I want to remind you that we are at the center of the world. These are the words of Eliane Brum, Brazilian filmmaker, journalist, and author. Right now, Eliane said, as our planet is experiencing climate collapse, the Amazon forest is truly the center of the world. If we don't grasp this, there is no way to meet the climate challenge. For us to be capable of resisting, we must become the forest and resist like the forest. Today we are putting COP30 we're putting ChangeNOW on the road to COP30, and we have the distinct privilege of meeting some of the toughest defenders of the Amazon rainforest, people that have spent their entire lives fighting for the rights of indigenous peoples and fighting for the conservation of the rainforest. Helena Gualinga is one of them. She is a member of the Quechua people of the Seriacu of the Ecuadorian Amazon. She is a defender of climate justice and of indigenous peoples' rights internationally. From a young age, she has witnessed violence against her family as big oil companies and mining companies and other extractive industries would seek to take their land. And we're super grateful to have the power of her leadership and her voice with us today to open the session. So please join me in welcoming the leader that Forbes called the new era of forest defender, Helena Gualinga.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I want to invite you to do something with me. Close your eyes just for a moment and picture the Amazon rainforest. What do you see? Maybe it's the mist rising from the canopy at dawn, the dense green stretching endlessly. Maybe you can imagine the sounds of hearing monkeys howl or other animals in the distance. Maybe it's the image of a river winding through it like it was a living artery. Or maybe it's a story that you've read of fires, floods, crisis. Or do you see people? Now, open your eyes and you will soon start to see some images behind me from my home. Because what you might have imagined might have felt far away and distant to this glass building that we find ourselves in. But for me, it's my home. I come from the Quechua people of Sarayaku, deep in the Ecuadorian Amazon. I grew up next to a little creek called Cajunyacu in a wooden house with a roof made of palm leaves. We don't really have walls, and the mornings were filled with a scent of the forest and the sound of birds and the voice of my family as we got up to sit by the fire and drink guayusa tea. The jungle wasn't something that was outside. Rather, we were actually inside of it or part of it. In Sarayaku, we call our territory Kausaksacha. That, in my language, means the living forest, because we don't see the forest as a collection of resources. We don't measure it in barrels of oil or hectares. We see it as a true living being, full of spirit and wisdom. The trees have names and the rivers carry stories. The animals and the plants, they're not separate from us. My mother actually used to say that the forest was our family, that the forest was our ayllu, and that we were all part of a delicate ecosystem in equilibrium. But as I learned more about what was beyond our territory, I realized that the world that we have been born into did not believe in such balance. The year I was born, an oil company arrived in our territory without our consent. It came in helicopters, threats, soldiers, machines, and it came to break open the earth to drill for oil. And that moment changed everything for us. During this time, I witnessed one of the most powerful resistance efforts by my elders and the leaders in my community. Years later, after more than a decade of struggle, Sarayaku won a landmark case at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. The court ruled that the Ecuadorian state had violated our rights by allowing oil exploration on our lands, and this was a victory for us. But Sarayaku is not alone. Across the Amazon, indigenous peoples are facing invasion after invasion. Sometimes it's machines and soldiers, guns and chainsaws, and it all comes in the name of development and profit. But behind those are very powerful men wearing suits, signing illegitimate contracts behind our backs. They smile to the cameras and they shout promises of a better world to the masses while they leave destruction behind in our living forest. You see, indigenous peoples in the Amazon rainforest have for decades been a sacrifice zone and sacrifice people. But this must change. In the past decade, I've worked across borders defending indigenous rights, advocated for climate justice, and standing in solidarity with communities facing similar struggles. I have witnessed the pattern again and again. It's legalized extractivism and illegal exploitation, and it's all layered on top of a global financial system that rewards destruction more than it rewards its protection. Today, over 80% of the Amazon has been affected by some form of degradation, whether it is fires, mining, oil drilling, deforestation. Human-made climate change is accelerating the forest's collapse. And science now confirms that what we've been saying for years, that the Amazon has come to its tipping point. The Amazon holds 20% of the world's fresh water. It stores over 120 billion tons of carbon. It regulates climate across continents. It's one of the last refuges for countless of species, some of them who have not even been discovered yet. And it's home to over 600 indigenous peoples. Yet, in 2025, we still have to justify why it should be protected. Let's be very clear. At this point, any exploitation in the Amazon, it's not just only unsustainable, it's immoral and it's suicidal, and it could not be justified. Recently, I read a headline I will never forget. In 2024, the year the Amazon dried up. Unfortunately, this was not a metaphor. This actually happened in the Amazon rainforest. And rivers ran dry, and some forests didn't recover from this. And communities were left without water, while the lungs of our planet literally was grasping for air. The grief is really hard to explain, and when I speak about this, I don't really know how to explain how it feels to have my heart ripped out every time I see these sacred lands being destroyed. But Indigenous people continue to show up. Around the world, Indigenous peoples carry for more than a third of the Earth's intact forest and stewards lands that contain 80% of the planet's remaining biodiversity. We are protectors of ecological balance, not just in the Amazon, but in the Arctic, the Congo Basin, the islands of the Pacific, and far beyond. Studies show that Indigenous managed lands experience lower rates of deforestation than any area that is formally protected by governments or others. Yet, despite our contributions to conservation, we face mounting threats: criminalization, forced displacement, violence, broken treaties, and erosion of our rights. Defenders of the earth are being assassinated for simply protecting life. Our knowledge is undervalued, and our existence is treated as an obstacle to profit. This must end. But there is one thing I want to share with you, which is a success story in Ecuador. 2 years ago, Ecuadorians voted to halt oil drilling in a national park. This set a historic precedent of what is known as climate democracy, and we definitely need more of this. This year, the world is watching. After 30 years of climate negotiations, COP30 is being held in the heart of the Amazon, in Manaus, Brazil. There is profound symbolism, of course, but symbolism is not enough. This COP must be a turning point. It must guarantee not just vague promises or talk, but actually real action. To begin with, it needs to stick to coherency and not hypocrisy, like building roads deep into the rainforest for the sake of a climate conference. It must demand policy coherency: no more oil, no more agro-expansion, or mining under the mask of the green transition. And most importantly, it must recognize Indigenous peoples as critical rights holders and decision makers, not just performative tokenization and inviting Indigenous peoples for photo ops, while our ancestral territories are being negotiated behind closed doors. Here are 3 things that the COP30 needs to do to succeed. 1, all nations must center Indigenous climate leadership in the negotiations. They need to provide funding and financing to Indigenous stewardship and governance. And third, the rights, interests, and demands of Indigenous people must be explicitly included in decision-making texts and the official texts that come out of these climate negotiations. As we find ourselves at this historic crossroads, this moment demands courage, it demands leadership, but above all, it demands humility. Humility to listen, humility to learn, humility to recognize that those who have lived in balance with nature for generations hold the answers that the world so desperately needs. We all have a calling to protect the earth. Please listen and act. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helena. And now, I would like to invite some very distinguished guests and speakers to join me on stage. Virgilio, João Pedro, and Ana. Hi, welcome. Thank you so much. This is a very humbling experience for me to be on stage with you three. I want to introduce you to them. Toni is Chief Executive Officer of COP30, former Vice Minister for Climate Change of the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Brazil. She has a distinguished background in environmental and social justice initiatives, having previously held leadership roles at the Institute for Climate and Society, at Greenpeace International, and the Ford Foundation in Brazil. Under her leadership, COP30 will focus on some very simple accomplishments here: strengthening multilateralism, accelerating the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the outcomes of the global stocktake, and mainstreaming climate action across economic and financial systems. Welcome. Professor Virgilio Viana is one of Brazil's leading experts on forestry and sustainable development. He is one of Forbes magazine's 50 over 50. He is the former State Secretary of Environment and Sustainable Development for the state of Amazonas in Brazil. He coordinated the establishment of the Forest Stewardship Council, and today he is the CEO of the Foundation for Amazon Sustainability. Welcome. João Pedro Braga is a Brazilian economist and climate justice activist. João's work redirects finance towards a just transition in the Amazon. He is a member of the Youth Advisory Committee to the Science Panel for the Amazon, where he works to bridge indigenous and scientific knowledge about the Amazon to inform better policies for a living Amazon. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much. It's an honor for me to be up here with you. Ana, I would like to start with you. Your team is preparing COP30 in a very complex geopolitical environment. Several countries are spending more on defense. We're seeing a rise in populism, increasingly normalized. You recently said, quote, "Climate is a bigger battle, not of one country, but humanity." How will you and your team rescue multilateralism later this year?
So, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, and good morning for everyone. I don't think it's not our team that will do that, it's everybody. It's every one of us. That's why we are calling everybody for this global multirão for climate change. Multirão is an indigenous word from Brazil that means a collective action for a shared goal. And I think, obviously one country left the Paris Agreement, but we have 197 countries that are staying in the Paris Agreement. We have several business companies here and that are really keen to continue and understand the need for us to accelerate action. We have citizens, we have subnational governments, so we're going to do it together. And I think at COP30, we feel can be, after 10 years of the Paris Agreement, of 10 years that has so much happened as well, we have to come to Belém, and everybody is very welcome to come to Belém, to renew our energies and accelerate action. And I think nowadays, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I believe each one of us can be part of the solution, and that's the spirit of multirão that we are calling for people to come. And we know that we can only do that together. That's why it's so important for us to reinforce the strength of multilateralism in Belém.
Great. Thank you. Virgilio, your life's work has inspired a generation of conservationists to see the interconnection between the people of the forest and the forest. And I just want to tell the audience, if you haven't seen Virgilio's TED Talk, it's a must-see. Please do that. Virgilio, can you put your deep ecological and spiritual understanding of rainforests and rainforest guardians into perspective for the audience?
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, joining Ana and João in this panel. I am the co-founder and CEO of FAS, Foundation for Amazon Sustainability. And when you ask me about the spiritual connection, my connection with the Amazon started when I was 16 years old, and I backpacked for 40 days overland crossing the Amazon. And after a long story, we decided to create FAS. FAS is the largest civil society organization in the Amazon. We are 17 years old. We work to fulfill the dreams that Helena shared with you here. We work to deliver concrete action for 800 communities in the Amazon, in a huge area, larger than Portugal, just for you to give to have a comparison, 14 million hectares. Our strategy is to focus on people. Oftentimes people think of the Amazon as a place with lots of plants and animals, carbon, water, and so on, but forget that it's a place where we have 28 million in Brazil, 38 million in total of the Amazon. So we have to have a human focus. So our purpose is to take care of people that take care of the rainforest. It's to achieve conservation through a people-centered approach and connect that to the spirituality, to the values of those that Helena so well represents here. The connection between this and the climate agenda is because of climate injustice. I think it's probably one of the most clear case of climate injustice. Those that have done the least to create the problem are suffering the most. So our role is to build resilience. And how do we do that? We do that through participatory approach, what you call radical listening. We listen to the priorities of communities, each of them, and then we try to come up with the funds, the resources to deliver those priorities together with them. And we do that using a systemic approach. We have learned that it's not enough to work with education only, health only, bioeconomy. It has to be all together on the basis of the priority that are set at the village level. That's the lesson learned. And in order to do this, we have to build alliances. So as Toni very well put it, and the call for COP30 is mutirão, which means collective action, we would like to invite all of you to become partners in any way or form that you can do. Maybe is to buy acai from a sustainable source here in Paris. Maybe it's to go there and become a volunteer. Whatever way, maybe become a philanthropist, whatever. I think we're in a moment where we need collective action. And my final message is, come and join us. The Amazon is too important, and we have to do our best to save it and protect indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you. João Pedro, I want you to talk to us about your journey to this point, how you came to focus on climate justice in the Amazon, and how that led you to rethink the economics of deforestation. Then I want you to take us forward on your journey. What does a just future for the Amazon and its guardians look like to you?
Big questions. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, easy ones.
It's a really great pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to speak alongside so many distinguished speakers, but also to enjoy the conference and also to speak with people who are willing to be part of the solution. And I really would like to make a reference here to the idea of the mutirão. My role in the mutirão is by connecting research and finance. I'm here as a student, I have my notebook, I'm learning a lot from all of the guests who are speaking, but really I am not someone from the Amazon, and this impacts a lot on my standpoint. I was born in Rio de Janeiro, which is a city in the Atlantic coast of Brazil, and the Atlantic forest has been destroyed by coffee plantations. It's a biome which has already seen the tipping point passing. It is also a biome who has been able to regenerate. So I have a lot of similarities, and I see a lot of similarities that I am able to explore in my PhD research on the financial drivers of deforestation. And just to explain what exactly that is the idea that when you think of Brazil, you probably think of football fields. But in the Amazon, every second that we are talking about here, half a football field is lost. And that amount can go up to 5 football fields. And that really depends on what is driving deforestation. Is that agriculture? Is that mining? Is that finance? What kind of activities are financing that? My role in understanding that research really is understanding the role of development banks on it. I am very privileged to sit, as Jonathan has mentioned, on the Youth Advisory Committee for the Science Panel for the Amazon. And in this committee, we are 14 young activists, 7 from indigenous families and indigenous territories, and 7 who have been able to explore what is it like to build bridges between the foreign environments, foreign universities, Brazilian universities, and the Amazon. So really, to try and understand how to rethink the economics of deforestation really is to addressing the causes of forest loss and try to understand how the financial sector, for instance, such as development banks, Brazilian development banks play a huge role in financing agriculture. How can these actors be part of the solution? Because as Anna said, if you are not part of the solution at this point, you are part of the problem. And really at this point, what I think is the key message that we are really dialoguing here is that everyone needs to play a part. Even if you're not from the Amazon, even if you're not from Brazil, being here, being conscious about what the causes of deforestation are, understanding that COP is only one of the points at the future for the Amazon, because it doesn't stop at COP. The Amazon is, as Eliane Brum has mentioned, the center of the world for many people, and it plays a really key role in regulating the water cycles in the world, and therefore we need to think from their perspective as well. So I feel that there is a really good opportunity in starting this conversation.
Excellent. Anna, I would like to come back to you and talk about the COP30 leadership circles that were recently announced. Sonia Guajajara, Minister of Indigenous Affairs in Brazil, she will lead the People's Circle, which is aiming to ensure that the traditional indigenous knowledge, indigenous ways of knowing are integrated into climate action. Leading up to Berlin, we know that there is strong pushback from agribusiness and from mining and gas interests globally. What announcements and initiatives favoring the authority of indigenous peoples and Afro-descendant peoples and local rainforest guardians might the COP30 presidency and the People's Circle make ahead of Berlin?
Now, that's really important for us, the People's Circles. And what a privilege to have Minister Sonia Guajajara. I don't know how many countries in the world has an indigenous person as a minister. And we're learning so much from her. And obviously, we are having a COP in the Amazon, and we should be thankful every day for our indigenous communities, our traditional people, our quilombolas, for preserving the forest that we have. Yeah. And we feel that in order for us to coordinate and help on hosting the COP30, we could only do that by learning from them, by listening their demands directly with the presidency. Mm-hmm. So by creating the circles of people led by Minister Sonia Guajajara is a way for the COP presidency to have aware throughout this process on the negotiations, on the heads of states meeting, on the action agenda, on the mobilization. What are the demands that indigenous people bring to us? They being, as they are, very straight. They know exactly what they want. And one of the biggest demands that indigenous people, and we just heard from an indigenous person just now, wonderful, I can't see her here, but what they are asking for is that the demarcation of land for indigenous people, traditional people, quilombolas, be accepted as a climate action.
Right.
We all know that is a climate action, but that has not been officialized, and that's their demand, that this is officialized. For a country like ours that have the constituency, that already have in our climate plans the indigenous peoples' lands demarcation as a climate plan, is quite easy. But for many countries that yet not have that, that's, I think, what the COP can do, is bring this debate to other constituencies. For some countries it's hard because they don't have that in their constituency, but what can they do to accept that this is such an important issue? Indigenous peoples' demarcation of land is a climate action, probably one of the best climate actions to preserve forests, to preserve the climate, and that's the message that they're bringing to us, and obviously we're looking forward working with them on this demand and any other demands that they bring to us.
Hear, hear. Thank you very much to you and the presidency for setting up this leadership circle. João Pedro, explain to us what you mean by just transition. It's a super, super critical and important issue, and I just want us to break it down a little bit for the people here. What do you mean by just transition in the Amazon, and why is redirecting finance so essential for protecting rainforest, peoples, and the rainforest? Who pays, who benefits?
Yeah. This is a key question that I have to face in my research, and I'll try and simplify in a way that it's understandable. But basically, we understand that economics has a really deep problem in trying to understand what justice is. There are many definitions, but all of them are not necessarily tackling interdisciplinary perspectives. And what I have managed to use in my research is the definition of the Science Panel for the Amazon. It is a panel which was convened by the United Nations to represent a scientific authority on the specific biome of the Amazon basin. So the 9 different countries that compose the Amazon, they have nominated their scientists, and this has then allowed them to develop a Amazon assessment report, which is kind of an encyclopedia of the biome. You can check it online. And their definition of a living Amazon is a forest who has standing trees, flowing rivers, and social justice for the guardians. This idea of a standing forest, living Amazon, really needs a shift from the economies in the Amazon today, because as Helena has mentioned today, and also as Virgilio has mentioned, the Amazon economies, they are not focusing on value creation, they are focusing on value extraction. And really, the individuals and the finances in financial institutions that fund this, they are part of a system. It's not that they have a specific meaningful or a specific impactful goal to underdevelop the Amazon, but this has been the way in which the economic history of the Amazon has developed. So really, the just transition of the Amazon, according to the Science Panel of the Amazon, and what I've been developing in my research, is using the concessional funds of development banks, of international funds, of also pension funds, to be able to redirect the finance, which is currently funding exploitation, to fund regeneration. And really that is payment for ecosystem services in a lot of projects which are already coming out. For instance, at COP, the payment for ecosystem services in the process of the Tropical Forest Forever facility. This is a key mechanism. And these mechanisms really need to take the money back into the communities. No intermediaries, but really to have a direct connection between investing in the economies, investing in the peoples, because these cannot exist separately. They are part of the solution for a living Amazon.
Exactly. Yes. Demarcation of lands and value creation, essential components of outmaneuvering the climate crisis. Virgilio, you believe in the urgency to act. When we had our first call to prepare for this event, the very first words Virgilio said to me was, Jonathan, we have crossed the 1.5 degree threshold. We are in a state of emergency. We urgently need to create new strategies to take real action. What new strategies are you and your team at the Foundation for Amazon Sustainability taking today?
Yes, we have crossed, as Anna pointed out, the 1.5 degree limit. I live in the Amazon. I live in Manaus, in the very center of the Amazon, where the Negro River meets the Solimões and begins the Amazon River for us Brazilians. I was shocked last year when we had this drought, which was the record drought since 1903. And before that, in 2023, we had the previous record. And in 2022, we had the record flood. 2021, we had the other record flood. So we went from 2 record floods to 2 record droughts. That means that the system is already out of balance. The tipping point in several dimensions has already come. So now, I think more than ever, we have an urgency to act. And this means that it's not to place the emphasis on negotiations for COP30, is to place an emphasis on how we can deliver concrete action. And I mentioned before climate injustice. And those of us who live in cities, we get a free ride from the services that indigenous peoples and local populations, traditional populations provide to us. The rainforest is a cooling, sort of an air conditioning for the planet. It's a source of water for the planet. So that has a value, and it's an economic failure. It's a market failure because that doesn't have a market price. So we have an urgency to act. This urgency means that, as the Secretary General of the UN says, we need everything all at once. And it's a time where we have to stress the importance of multilateral organizations and multilateral action, not the opposite. Oftentimes people criticize COPs and say that they don't move enough. But I think we have to recognize that if it was not for the UN processes, we would be heading to 5 degrees. Now we're heading to 2.5, which is still not the desirable. But we have accomplished a lot. But we have to do more. And this is particularly the case for the Amazon, because as I like to coin, and I did coin this phrase many years ago, that the Amazon is too big to fail. Imagine the small banks of Wall Street that required a couple of $1 trillion. It started with 800 billion, ended up with $3 trillion to save the banks. How much is worth the Amazon? I bet it's worth much more than the Wall Street banks that were doomed to fail. So we have to mobilize finance. We have to mobilize concrete action. And that's why we always go back to the word mutirão. Mutirão calls for everybody, urgently. So it's not only a slow mutirão, a turtle mutirão. It has to be a sort of a race, a Ferrari mutirão, very fast. Do the best that we can everywhere, all over the place, in Paris and in Manaus, in Belém, in Rio, all over the place. Let's act now.
Yes. Absolutely. So Anna, let's stay with the theme of action, implementation. The calls for COP reform have been louder and louder since Baku. Specifically, calls for COP to prioritize people over polluters and to be less dominated by fossil fuel interests. Also for wealthier nations to get serious about financing poor nations. One of your priorities is to accelerate implementation of the Paris Agreement and the outcomes of the global stocktake. So I'd like to ask you, how will you shift emphasis onto implementation, and what role will the new global ethical stocktake play in implementation and reform?
That's a great question. I mean, first, we needed to create a sense of co-responsibility. We can see what's happening at the moment. It's true that all of us, every country, is really geared on creating renewable energy. Now we have electric cars everywhere, solar panels, wind energy. In many countries, in China, in Brazil, in the US, here, everywhere. But at the same time, demand for energy is also growing. So what's happening is that we are accelerating, with one foot accelerating renewables, but the other foot is still accelerating fossil fuel. We are not substituting our demands from one to another because the demand is growing. So one thing that we needed to understand is also the role of consumers that could be choosing, for example, on buildings or on mobility, to opt for substitution. So it's no longer to just have renewables, we need to ask for the substitution from some sectors that are now, we have the technology to go from one that's more polluting to another that's cleaner. So that substitution requires a joint responsibilities of producers and consumers. And I feel we have been talking very little about the role of consumers. It's very hard to change habits. All of us know that, how difficult it is to change the habits. But if we don't change our own habits, the way we behave, we are not going to change the big economic forces that are there. So the global ethical stocktake, that's a proposal from the Secretary General Guterres, President Lula, and will be led by Ministra Marina Silva, is exactly that, is to talk about the behavior, how we change the behavior of people, how we change the behavior of consumers, by everybody understanding they are ethical and moral, that when we talk about climate, it's just not only an economic issue, it's not only an environmental issue. At the end of the day, it's an ethical issue about humanity.
Right.
And if we cannot talk about those things, is obviously unfortunately, we just had this moment that the Pope has just passed away, and I think him more than anybody has told us that we have to act for nature, because by acting to protect nature, to act on fighting against climate change, we are acting for humanity. And I think it's bringing that to a different sense, not just talking to our minds, but talking to our hearts, using different expressions, arts, music, poems, so that people can also join the multidão by reflect. What can we do every day for climate change or against climate change?
Yeah.
What is the action that each of us, little, big ones, whatever, we can do as consumers, we can do if you're a CEO, you can do when you elect people, you can do as a mother. Every day we can do a small and a big action. And I think that big call is the purpose of the global ethical stocktake that Ministra Marina Silva will be leading.
Yeah, thank you. So we have about a minute left. I would like to give everyone 15 or 20 seconds to wrap up, but specifically, what is the legacy that you want to see from COP30 for the Amazon? 20 seconds for each one of you, starting with João Pedro.
Lovely. I would like to build on both points because I feel that there is a really good opportunity here. And this is something that just reminded me, the word for Pope, one of his titles is pontifices, in French pontifice. And that means bridge. We are building bridges. The multidão, you have to be connected to people. You have to feel like you're part of something. And we are part of planet Earth, but planet Earth is a really big community. We have to get closer. This event is a very important one. I was recently dialoguing with some groups of climate leaders in Brazil. We are still waiting for the Brazilian COP presidency to choose who will be the youth leader. It's a group of 24 people. We were discussing, whoever gets elected, what do we want from this COP? We want finance to be institutionalized in the Tropical Forest Finance Facility, in the Tropical Forest Mechanism too. We want the youth to be present, not in a tokenistic way. And we really would like to have a concrete declaration echoing what Helena has mentioned here, no more fossil fuels, no more oil, recognizing indigenous people. These are some of the main demands of the global youth of climate, and also the Brazilian side of it, because we really see that we can be leaders for inspiration, but we first need to start at home, individually, but systemically. The national component is important so that we can change the world and then change planet Earth. Thanks.
Thank you. I invite you both to have the last word, but please, 15 seconds each, 20 seconds each.
COP30 is going to be the COP for action. So I'd like to invite all of you to ask 3 questions to yourself. What have I done? What do I plan to do? And how the upcoming COP can be a source of inspiration for you to do more. Thank you.
Thank you.
And very quickly, I want to finish as I started. Just remember that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. If you remember that every day and remind everybody about that, perhaps we can together change the world. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you so much. What a pleasure and an honor to have been with you. Great job. Thank you.
Valeu, valeu.
Beleza. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's fantastic. And now, welcome. Hi. Welcome. I sit here? Yeah, okay. Well, that was pretty fantastic. So Princess Esmeralda de Belgique is an environmental activist and a lifelong campaigner for the Amazon, for the rights of women, and for the rights of indigenous peoples. She is a journalist, author of 7 books, and her documentary films have featured the Amazon and the Congo rainforests. She is president of the Leopold III Fund for Nature Exploration and Conservation, created in 1972 by her late father, who was one of the first Europeans to visit the Xingu National Park in Brazil in 1964. She is chair of Friendship Belgium, ambassador of WWF, champion of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, and ambassador for Stop Ecocide International. She was arrested in London in 2019 after joining an Extinction Rebellion week-long sit-in protest. Of her arrest, she said, quote, "The more people from all sections of society who protest, the greater the impact will be." Esmeralda, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, and hello, everybody.
When we got to know each other, it was clear how important your family has been to your purpose in life. And I would just like you to talk to us about the link between your family and your activism, particularly your devotion to conservation of the Amazon and other ecosystems.
Yes, that's true, Jonathan. My father was a pioneer in the environment, and he was in Brazil, as you mentioned, in the 60s, with the Brothers Villas-Boas. Of course, the Brothers Villas-Boas were Brazilians who really fought for the recognition of indigenous rights and for the first national protected area, the Xingu Park. So my father was there several months, and he really learned how indigenous culture, indigenous fights were important to protect the environment. And he got this thing which has been all my life, is the connection between biodiversity, protection, and human rights. Because there are people living in the Amazon, like we heard in the panel. It's not only nature and a treasure of biodiversity, it's the home of people. Mm-hmm. So you have always to have those two fights, which are so important. And that's how I learned all about the Amazon very early on.
You have helped lift up the voices of members of the Quechua of the Siriyaku, Helena Gualinga's people, also Chief Raoni. When you look at where we are today and where Indigenous people's authority and leadership is today, what do you think is going right, and what do we still need to fight harder for?
Well, it's obvious that there is much more awareness, and you see many more Indigenous people in all the summits, like here, like the COP. But it's not enough. They are not sitting at the table where the decisions are made. I mean, we are talking about their lands. They protect 80% of the biodiversity of the world, and they are not there. Yes, they are there for, as Helena said, for photo opportunities, for many things, but not where they should be when the future is discussed.
Yeah, it's true. At the center of climate action
Exactly.
is what we hope to see accomplished at COP30 in Belém.
That's why it's so important, the COP in Belém, symbolically, of course, and for all the hope that we heard in the panel that might happen and might change.
Right, and finance mechanisms that ensure global finance goes directly into their hands, directly into their governance systems. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Paris Agreement. It's been 10 years since the Paris Agreement, and still we see no solutions anywhere near the magnitude of the challenge. Is this because our climate advocacy is falling short? And what do you think we should keep doing, and what should we do differently where the climate advocacy is concerned?
First of all, I think we should really all be involved, because we see our leaders are not very active. There is a lot of drawback for the moment. So we need companies, we need citizens, we need everybody to push for change. I like the name of the summit here, ChangeNOW. That's exactly what we need. We need a system change. We need this enormous amount of money to go to the right place. And we cannot hear all the time, but this costs a lot of money, we don't have the money. Yes, we do have the money. How is it possible that when we need money for wars, there's always money? So we need all that flute of money going to the right place. We need a change of mentality. We need to hear the indigenous people solution. We need all that. And I think one of the important things is the message. We, all of us in the environmental sector, we have always talked about climate, of course, but nature, and not enough about people. I mean, this crisis of climate and biodiversity is a health crisis, is an equality crisis, is a gender crisis, education, it's all of that. It's intersectional, and we have to put the emphasis on that.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to talk to you about civil disobedience. In the last several years, we have seen, as I said earlier, a populist momentum on both sides of the Atlantic, but in other parts of the world. We've seen authoritarianism and authoritarian governments deny freedom of expression, but also denying the climate crisis. You've said, quote, "It is time to use civil disobedience as a central tool in the fight for climate justice and to push politicians into action," end quote. Has your position on civil disobedience evolved? What is your position today on civil disobedience?
Well, my position has not evolved, but the situation has evolved. I mean, there are many, many climate protesters in jail. I live in London. I know people who are in jail for 4 years, 5 years. Unbelievable when you think about that, just because they were protesting for the future of all of us.
Yeah.
So obviously it's not easy to do those protests anymore. That doesn't mean we should not, but I understand there is a big risk, a big danger. So I think we have to do all sorts of actions, and that will be use the art, use poetry, use music, try to convey a message and rally the people who don't think like us, because it's important to talk to everybody. So we need to have that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. When we spoke earlier about extractivism and colonialism as the root causes of the degradation of nature and human rights, you said some very profound things about alternatives to colonialism. I'd like to ask you now just to elaborate on what alternatives you see and how you think we can advocate socially, politically, and economically for these alternatives.
Yes, you heard before what was saying that we are still in this system of extractivism, of getting all the resources from Mother Earth and from the developing countries, mainly for us in the industrialized country. So that has to change, absolutely. The whole financial system has to change. And there are many other solutions, whether it is circular economy, whether it is putting the growth where it really matters, which is health, education. Of course, we are not talking about degrowth in the developing country. They need growth. But we have to do it sustainably, with renewables, the right way. And again, the indigenous vision of the world is very important for us, to mix our science, which is important, and I know that for the moment science also has a tough time.
Under attack.
So we need obviously the science and technology, but together in bridge with the indigenous wisdom and another way of living for the planet, for the people.
Right, right. Non-indigenous sciences, indigenous sciences, bridging them, because inherent to both is our pathway, is humanity's pathway out of the climate crisis and nature's collapse. And then you mentioned our own consumption patterns. You know, we I think here in nations like France, Europe, we also need to think very long and hard about the choices that we make in life, our own consumption patterns. Clover Hogan a few years ago mentioned that we cannot also think that paper straws and electric vehicles, that the individual's choice is going to solve the climate crisis. But there is an important role for our own consumption patterns to play, while not taking pressure off of the political establishment, the industrial establishment, the corporate establishment's role, majority role in correcting, reversing, and solving the climate crisis. It's I think it's a conundrum. The individual's responsibility versus the institutional responsibility.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Jonathan. Having said that, it's not only easy, it's not always easy for customers to make the choice.
Yeah.
Because if you want to travel by train, it's more expensive than plane. So you don't want to penalize people and say, oh, you're flying too much.
Yeah.
I mean, the burden is also too much on normal people. There is an elite of extra rich people in our countries and in developing countries who have an impact much greater. We have to realize that as well. And I think we are in a place where we talk about the Amazon. It's also important not to put the focus on Brazil and say Brazil is destroying the Amazon. No, we are all complicit because there are multinational behind that. There are also big financial institutions always putting money on damaging the environment. So there's a whole system we have to change. And I wanted to also say the power of the law, when the law is just, is very important. And if we could, for example, have ecocide as really a criminal act, international criminal act, that would change also things. Because maybe some companies would say, oh, if I do this damage, I might go to jail, and not just pay a fine like they do now. So that's also something that we should push for and campaign for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. You've been devoted to women's rights for your life. I'd like to ask you to place the rights of women in the context of humanity's grand challenges, the climate crisis, collapsing biodiversity, the peace movements, planetary health. Talk to us about your perspective now on the role of women's rights within humanity's challenges.
One day, I was listening to Helena Gualinga, sister of Helena, and she said that when Mother Earth was hurt with extraction, with the oil drilling, with the mining, women were suffering because women were being in the same time raped, harassed. And I think that connection stayed with me in my heart always. And it's so true. We are destroying Mother Earth, and also there's so much violence against women all over the world, not only in the Amazon, everywhere. Why is that? So we need to fight for that as well. We need to finish with this toxic masculinity, I would say. We need to do something about it. It's still very present. And in the climate fight, women are incredibly present. They are at the forefront, and they have solutions. They are not only victims. They have so many solutions. We need that 50-50 vision, men and women working together and collaborating.
Yeah. What is on your horizon? Where are you focusing your energies and your attentions now for the remainder of this year? You know, you've been an activist your whole life, so influential in many of the, whether it's climate or the Amazon, Congo Basin. What does your future look like in 2025 and beyond?
Always working on climate justice, for gender, for geographical justice, for indigenous people, for human rights, and storytelling, because I think we need storytelling. We need also to show that there are many people all over the world who are doing things, who are moving ahead, and that gives hope, because hope is in action. So we have to tell those stories. And I think if you ask people everywhere, I have seen surveys, do you want to do something for climate? They say yes. You ask people, do you want peace? They say yes. And why is it that we have war and we don't have climate action? So we need to mobilize many more people, young and older, to move, to do that change.
Yeah. I opened by saying that wherever we live on planet Earth, the health of the Amazon rainforest is a determinant of our health. And with the remaining time that we have left, which is about 30 seconds, how should Europeans show up for the Amazon and for Brazil, but particularly for the rainforest guardians?
Well, they have to support, they have to talk about everybody, they have to see if they have some investment, where the investment go. They should not support fossil fuels. They should support the campaign of ecocide. There's many things to do. And remember, as you said, that Amazon is for all of us. It's the future of our children.
Well, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you so much for your kindness and your friendship and the awesome way that you have spent your life in holding up others. Princess Esmeralda, thank you. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for making Beyond COP30, the Amazon as the center of the world, part of your Change Now experience. With that, I bid you farewell. Keep the Amazon in your hearts and minds. Cheers.